Welcome. It's always great to do the last talk of the day, so thank you for sticking around. It's been great fun to be here. I hope you've all had a wonderful day today. My name is Liam Hampton, and I'm a Microsoft Senior Developer Advocate and a software engineer. And today I'm going to be talking to you about how you can deploy your applications and scale them on Azure with the Azure Developer CLI. So who has used Azure before? Okay, so there's a few of you. Good. Who's had an issue deploying their resources to Azure before? No issues? So. Do you do it manually, or do you do it? You do it manually. All right, wonderful, brilliant. So hopefully I can show you something cool today, because we're going to be talking about a CLI which does it automatically. So I'm a Go engineer. I actually contribute to this project as well. So I work alongside the Azure Developer CLI product group and a few of the others, like the Azure CLI. But yeah, so it's all good fun to get hands-on with the products as well. Let's talk about them. So here's a good statement. Our dev tools are our lifeline, because there's so many different problems, and you probably noticed this. I've been in the industry for about 6 years now, so straight as a graduate, straight in software engineering, then into advocacy. Developer tools have been like the epitome of everything that we've been doing and building, and I've always worked in developer experience. So it's all about improving productivity, improving scalability, how you deploy your app infrastructure, how you then build an application, and so on and so forth. So to do all of that, you need developer tools. Developer tools are often quite complicated, but in the IT industry, I don't know, I always seem like if there's one small problem, someone's going to make a company out of it. Someone's going to build one single solution for that problem. And then it gets acquired and so on and so forth. That's the best bit about the industry we work in. I absolutely love it. But go back to 2007, and we moved into something called DevOps. So the DevOps lifecycle has got 8 different stages. You've got plan, code, build, test, release, deploy, operate, and monitor. Each one of these has got a load of technologies underneath it. Each one of these stages has got problems and solutions. This is brilliant, right? But it promotes collaboration. It touches every single section of the lifecycle, or software developer lifecycle rather. Right, so it shortens your lead time. It's all about iteration, building better, building quicker, and releasing faster. Ultimately leaving in a lower failure rate, which is all good fun. But we're not going to focus too much on DevOps today. Just the basic. We're going to look at the operations side. So you can split this into 2 sides, quite obviously, development and operations. But operations is fundamentally platform engineering. So hands up if you know what platform engineering is. And you can define it pretty well, okay? Cool. So we're going to talk about this a little bit today. Platform engineering is a way to improve the developer experience. And its end goal is to essentially create a frictionless drive straight through the software development lifecycle. It minimizes the overheads, it reduces your cognitive load, and it makes it a little bit easier for you to deploy your infrastructure. So if you think about infrastructure as a service, that's the layer that we're talking about here. Now, we've come into this era of AI. Now, AI is wonderful, but it's made this so much more complicated than we ever thought before. Everybody wants AI, okay? But let's strip all of that back and go straight back to basics. Here's a really basic or a simplified diagram of a 3-tier application. You've got a front end, which is your UI. You've got a back end, which is your server. And you've got a database storage. Really quite a simple architecture there. Don't quote that, right?
Your attention, please.
Oh, attention. So what we wanted to do, hands up if you can deploy all 3 of these and you know how to do it really well. Who's a full stack engineer? A bit. Okay, so there's some hesitation, right? I can confidently say I can do 2. I can only do the back end and the database. I cannot do a front end. I can't write React, but I can probably write you a Node server or a Go server and connect it to a Mongo database. All right? This is always really, really difficult. So let's say you get over that hurdle and you learn some React, and you can now write a basic front end, you can write your basic back end, and you can have a database, and you've got this little web app that you can play with, and it's all really cool, and it works locally, you've got it on your little machine, and you're so happy with yourself. How do you scale it? You deploy it. Getting it to the cloud is now your next obstacle, and that is super difficult. People didn't quite realize how hard it can be when you're learning to code, or when you're sort of getting started with cloud engineering and software development, that the deployment stage is usually where people give up. Now, when I speak to engineers and friends and developers, they say, oh yeah, I made this really cool website, worked really well on my local machine. All right, so how do I access it? How do I play with your shop and, buy a bunny rabbit or whatever you want, right? You can't unless you deploy it. So it's not scalable, and it's definitely not maintainable like that. That's where they then quit. They're like, software engineering is not for me. I do not want to do it. I can't do it. It's too hard. And then everybody, corporate said, let's add AI. Let's add AI to this. Let's have a chatbot. All right, cool. So you've done that. You can get that now working locally. How do you get it to the cloud? How do you deploy it? Where's your model stored? How are you getting there, right? So everybody is like, yeah, AI is the best. It's amazing. You add it. It's wonderful. But it adds this next layer of complexity. And now, I didn't know AI. I'm very much DevOps. I'm platform engineering. I'm containers, VMs, that kind of stuff. I'm like a bare metal kind of person. AI was not my wheelhouse, but I've had to really quickly learn it over the past 2 years. So that wasn't hard enough. This is what an architecture now looks like. Really quite difficult. So you've got a user input. This is an agent's AI model. This is actually quite a complicated diagram for quite a simple solution. But you can see how AI has now taken that really small 3-tier application, just like bombarded it with a load of stuff, which people were like, no, I'm going to walk away from this one and I'm not going to bother touching this. This is what I felt like when I first started seeing these architecture diagrams. It just wasn't for me. But if you break it down, we have got user input. We have got a managed identity, which, by the way, is passwordless authentication in Azure. No extra cost. So you're not using the API keys, right? That's just what managed identity is. It then talks to Azure Container Apps. I know that bit. I can do containers. I like containers. We then get application insights. So you're getting your logs. Then you're going to talk to your AI services, the processing services, which are agents. So we've come from generative AI, and if you heard some of the other talks today, agents is more of the next level, right? It's now a goal-orientated AI application. So you give it a goal, it'll go off and do it for you, as opposed to having more so of the human in the loop. You've got a writer agent, a research agent, we've got an editor agent. All just comes under one AI process. But if you're adding that kind of stuff in, it looks so much more complicated just to get a few things out at the end. So I'm not going to teach you how to work with AI. I'm not going to talk about tokenization and that kind of stuff today. But this is just to illustrate how difficult it can actually be when you start plugging AI into your workflows. So you then end up triple crying, right? It's just not fun. It's really hard. So Microsoft, what do we have? We've got this really cool tool called the Azure Developer CLI. Now this started around, I'm going to say 2022 in about April. So 2 years ago, it's been building. And now it's at a really good point where we can confidently say it helps. So the Azure Developer CLI is essentially a platform engineering tool to help you get to the cloud much quicker. It has high-level commands, which I'm going to show you and talk you through in a minute. But in a nutshell, it's an open source tool that gets your local deployment to your environment or your Azure environment much quicker with some super friendly commands. And we've seen the bottom line before, haven't we? Code, build, deploy, and monitor. Where are they from? The DevOps lifecycle. So it all fits in that wheelhouse and under that umbrella of helping developers iterate, scale, and maintain their applications much, much better. What does it support? Well, it supports JavaScript, .NET, Python, and Java workloads. So if you've got applications, it works. It supports these ones. It's funny, right? It's written in Go, but it doesn't support Go. I'm a Go engineer. Boo. Not yet, anyway. Maybe in the future. But these are the ones that it supports. And if you've got those applications that you're running locally and you want to get it in Azure, have a go at this. So I've spoken about the commands. You've got azd up. We've got azd init, which obviously initializes your workflow. You've got azd up, which then brings everything up. It sort of encapsulates a few commands into one command. Azd monitor, azd pipeline config, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And you've got azd down. These are not all of the commands, by the way. There's loads more. But they're all really simple. So developers are used to really imperative paradigms with CLIs, which means you've got arguments where you have to say resource group, create, give it a name, in a location, blah, blah, blah. It's really, you get these horrible long sort of commands, right? And nobody likes them. I don't like them. I find it really difficult to work with those. But this CLI is very developer focused and very developer intuitive, right? So it's going to make it easier, far better for you to deploy this. It's sort of like a big bucket of goodness. I love it. So like I said, these are not all the commands, but we'll talk about them in a minute. And as you can see, it gets your workload way quicker. How do you install it? Well, if you're running a Windows machine, then you can use Winget. You've got Choco. some nice crashes over there. This is a really fun venue to present in because you could, I don't know, like the folks with the headphones, how much you can hear outside, but this is quite fun. So if you've got Linux, you've got curl, and if you're using macOS, you can use brew. So it is available on all the operating systems that you predominantly use. We're going to ignore like the smaller ones. But it also works in code spaces. Who has worked in a code space before? Who knows what a code space is? Oh, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to show you what a code space is anyway. So a code space is essentially a remote development environment. VS Code, hands over, you know VS Code? Yeah, okay, that's better. Visual Studio is basically VS Code in a browser, right? A remote development environment. It runs everything. It's kind of like a VM, runs on a VM in Azure, but it's got ephemeral storage. You can kind of spin them up and tear them down. And I'll show you how I use it in a minute in the demo. But with AZD, it is, if you don't want to have the CLI, you can have the extension, which is a VS Code extension, and it is essentially a driver for the CLI. So if you don't want to use your terminal, you can use clickety click click through VS Code, and it's all good fun there. But if you're going to do the extension way, then you also need the bicep extension, because bicep is how this all works. Who knows what bicep is? Infrastructure as code? Okay, so a few nods with infrastructure as code. So infrastructure as code is a way where you can code a file which hits service APIs in a remote environment, i.e. in Azure, and allows you to deploy your services through code. So, sir, like you said there, you do it manually, you go into the portal, you log in, and you say, I want to create this resource group, and in my resource group I want this app service, and so on and so forth. You can code all of that out with some modules, and I'm going to show you what that module looks like. And FYI, if you install it with the CLI, then this automatically gets installed with it, like the bicep extension. Bicep is just a way to manage infrastructure as code. So, how does AZD work? I've mentioned bicep. I haven't mentioned Terraform, but it does also support Terraform. But you can also look at the templates. So these templates are authored by us at Microsoft and folks in the community. So if you've got this wonderful application, your little bunny rabbit store that you want to start selling pets on, then you upload that and you start adding chatbots to it to ask it, what does a bunny rabbit like to do in winter? Does it sleep or does it jump around, right? You can have those sort of things in there, and you can create a template and have it hosted on here. So we've actually got a number of templates. I think there's actually quite a lot. I don't know how many. I think it's over 100 now. But they're all authored. They're amazing. And they're created by all different folks for all different applications. So you can see here, we've got a .NET AI samples with Azure OpenAI, whereas you've got an eShop on web app with Redis cache. So they're all different styles of templates. Definitely go and take a look at this, and I'll give you a link to it in a bit. It's a really good way to get started. So the templates, this is what Bicep looks like in case you haven't seen it before, in case you're interested. It's very modular. You have got the parameters at the top, you've got your resources, so we're going to create a Cosmos instance here. We're going to call the service API and just give it a bunch of key value pairs. It's actually really quite simple, and it uses Azure Verified Modules. Now, Azure Verified Modules is basically a way to just maintain the sort of integrity of Bicep modules themselves, because someone needs to look after them somewhere. So Bicep is essentially a wrapper around ARM templates. ARM templates is Azure Resource Management. So, who's heard of ARM templates before? Your attention, please. Yeah, cool. All right, 1, 2. This is a fun way to wrap ARM templates, and this is a more developer intuitive way to write them. ARM templates were inherently messy, and I hated them. Nobody wanted to work with them. Now you can work with these, and they're a hell of a lot better. So, this was just what we created to make ARM templates more manageable. As a result of that, we were able to build developer tools to use this, which then helps drive more adoption through the Azure platform, makes it easier for you to deploy your resources. So all in all, it's like a chain of goodness that we've just thought, we have a problem for developers, we're going to solve it piece by piece and then put it all together. And I'm going to show you a little demo after this anyway, to show you kind of what's going on. So some good use cases for the Azure Developer CLI. Where would you use it? Well, building a new startup. So I speak to countless startups and countless founders who are not so technical or have the issue that we all have. You can do 2 of the things and not all 3. You can deploy a backend and a database, but you can't write a front end. That's a big hurdle when you're building a startup, because someone needs to interact with your workload. So a really good way to get started with this is to have a template, a ready-made template that you can modify yourself or build and deploy with the Azure Developer CLI. Team onboarding. So when I had somebody join my team a while ago, not at Microsoft, this was another company, we were all really happy that they sorted out their development environment to work on in 3 days. We got a round of applause. Well done. Well, that's amazing, because 3 days was considered really quickly. If you had a template and this whole application with infrastructure as code, this whole ecosystem that we're working with now, well, you could get up and running in under an hour. That's way better. So for team onboarding, this is a really good way to get started. If you want environment separations, in production, you typically have a development environment, you've got a test environment, a pre-prod environment, and then your production, the holy grail that nobody touches. You can have all of these environments separated by using this one tool. This prevents config drift. So if anyone's familiar with infrastructure as code, config drift is where you simply make small changes along the way, and instead of going straight up, you've gone somewhere over here. That's not good. So this is a really good way to maintain that and prevent that and avoid it from happening. And then, of course, students and university classes. So I speak to countless people, countless students, student ambassadors of Microsoft, university lecturers, all sorts of things, right? They have issues where they spend entire lectures just setting up their environment. That's really not good. That's very poor. I remember at university, I spent 2 lectures setting up a bunch of virtual machines, VLANs, and a bunch of networking behind it. If I could do this and I was able to use a template, it would be done in 1 lecture, and I'd also get straight away. So I basically paid to waste my time in that instance, right? That's not good, so this makes it better. I appreciate I'm going very quickly because I do want to show you the demo, and I'm already at 16 minutes and we got 20 minutes. So the demo, the template that I'm using is the Contoso Creative Writer, which is not up there, but it's down here. Scaling AI Create, that's not even the right link. Well, it is the right link, but not the right wording. This is what I wanted to show you. This thing, which looks so awfully complicated, is now not going to be so complicated because I'm going to show you how to deploy it. I wouldn't dare try and do this manually, like yourself, sir. I wouldn't dare go into the portal and try and deploy each one of these by myself. I can write code, I'm a good engineer, but I'm not a good point and click person. So, without further ado, I'm going to play a video, just for time's sake, and hopefully it plays. There we go. So I'm going to show you a code space. Now, to get a code space, you click on the green button. This is in GitHub. So hopefully if you haven't seen GitHub, it's a repository storage for your code. Clicked on the green button and said create code space on main. I have sped this up because it takes a bit of time. Once it's all loaded, you can see this is basically your IDE, Visual Studio Code, in a browser. I'm not in Visual Studio Code, I'm actually in a browser. This is the diagram which we're going to deploy, and there's only 3 commands that I need to run. So if you're not very terminal savvy, or you don't really like writing lots of terminal commands, this is a really good way to do it. So the first thing I'm going to do is log into the Azure Developer CLI, which is what we're using today. And I'm just going to skip the annoying bit with the authenticator. And then I'm going to log into the Azure CLI. For some reason, this template typically wants you to do both. You don't always have to. I'm using demo mode for this, so I don't want you to see all of my secure information from all my subscription IDs. Then I'm just going to run AZD up. Gosh, it's loud, isn't it? So when I run AZD up, it prompts me for a couple of things in the terminal. It's just going to ask me for a name for the environment, which if you do this now, in the top left, you'll see a .azure folder, which is the whole environment name for me. It's going to ask me for a subscription. I'm going to choose the subscription I want it to be placed in Azure. And then it's going to give me a location. I chose Canada East because I know that's where all of this information or all of my resources actually run, and I know that I have quota. And now you're just going to watch it all deploy. I've coded it all up in Bicep, and I will show you the Bicep files in a minute. But you can see all of these resources that I'm deploying manually. Well, I'm not deploying manually, but I'm deploying automatically, which I would deploy manually otherwise. Very, very difficult, and this is really, really awesome. Now, I sped this up deliberately because this took about 20 minutes, but that's still a hell of a lot quicker than 3 days. And what it's doing here, going through, calling all the APIs, setting it all up for me, connecting it all together, and all I've really done is do what I do best, write some code, and saved it. This is just Java, Python, requirements, container, output. This isn't actually part of AZD itself. This is a PostScript. But down here you can see that we've done, it all passed, it's all deployed, and now I can click on that link. But I'm not going to click on that link because I can show you this live. So if I skip out of this one, over here, you can see that we actually have this same environment that's been set up, if it hasn't logged me out, over in a browser. So this is, oh, you can't see it. Or can we, maybe if I do this. Ah, there we go, sorted it. I'm a tech genius, really. So in here, we can see that I have a browser. In my browser, I have got a code space. This code space is essentially a virtual machine or a container running on a virtual machine in Azure, and this is the same deployment that you just watched happen. So let's go and have a look at some of the code just for some sanity. Over here, it uses an infra folder. Inside the infra folder, we have got the app or the core, the hooks. This is the main bicep. So this is what calls all of the other, if it wants to load with the extension, with all the pretty writing. It looks pretty horrible, but this is essentially just a describe blocks with all the resources. So the resource group, what I've called it, all the principals. So I'm using managed identities, so it's all passwordless. So using RBAC roles. We have got an app. Let's go take a smaller one. Let's look at the website. This is quite a nice one to look at because it's very, very short. All this here is doing is creating a container app. That's all it's doing. But you can see all I'm writing in here is the name, the location, any tags, an identity name, the environment name, just basic things that you would put into the portal as you're creating an Azure App Service or a container app or any of these other services you want to deploy in Azure. This is just the code version of it. And it's really quite simple. The same with the core. So in here we can look and we can see that, hey, look, I've got the database. This is a Cosmos account. So again, what we saw in the slides, this is a Cosmos instance. It's all very modular. It's all very well pieced together, and it's all very easy to maintain. So when it comes to maintaining config drift, you've got your Git history. You have also got all of the versioning in here as well. So it's pretty cool. What else should we have a look at? We should go and have a look at the actual application itself. So I've just used AZD show. You can see the services that we've got. So we've got the environment name and we've got the portal. If I was to look in the portal, you can see all of these services that it created for me inside a resource group. That's a lot of resources, and that's quite difficult to do manually. So let's look at it. Let's reload it, see what it's doing. Okay, so the Contoso Creative Writer. If you've ever been to a Microsoft demo, you'll see we use this word Contoso. Contoso is our fake store. And all it's done is it wants to create an article. So I've got an example here. If I click example, and I'm saying this is using agents. So we've passed generative AI, we've passed the whole talking to ChatGPT and getting pictures out and explaining pictures. We're now onto agents, which is more of a goal-focused AI. Application. So you can say, go ahead and do something and then evaluate yourself, removing the human from the loop. So I'm saying, can you find the latest camping trends and what folks are doing in the winter? Pretty vague, but also pretty direct. Products. What products should you look at? I'm saying, can you use a selection of tents and sleeping bags as context? So I'm telling it to go ahead and go and research some of these products. Oh, this is very loud. And then I'm going to ask it to, I can't talk over that, it's too loud. There you go. And then I'm going to ask it to write an engaging article. And I'm going to make this maybe 500 because that was too long otherwise. So let's just say 500 to 800 words. Then I'm going to click start. But when I click start, I'm actually going to open this little thing over here first, this little box. And you can see this workflow working. So I'm going to start the research agent, and what it's going to go do, and it's going to find out what folks are doing in winter, and it can say that it's completed it. So it's found some resources over here. It's sort of done some research. It's managed to find out what folks are doing in the winter. You've then got the other agent, or the next agent, which is the marketing agent, and it's going to go off and look at some tents. I don't know what the Trailmaster X4 is. If anybody likes camping, then tell me if that's good or not. It's done that a few times. The Alpine Explorer tent, I don't know, again, tell me if it's great or not. And then, almost ruined it there. And then it started writing the article. So this article down here looks really, really cool. You don't need to write your own blogs anymore. This is a pretty awesome sort of application. And then what it's gone and done is it's gone and edited. So the editorial agent itself has sort of gone over what it's written. It's looked at, is it good, is it not? And saying there's no other feedback. Your article is well written, engaging. Sure, products linked to the functional links are functional, and consider adding a brief conclusion to summarize the key points and trends discussed. So it's gone back and it's sort of like put in what it's written, decided whether it's good or not. But that's by the by, right? The purpose of this is I managed to deploy that very quickly in say 20-25 minutes if the video wasn't sped up. And this is a really full application, end-to-end scenario. Imagine if you're a startup and you just want to pull out these things and you don't want to create camping stuff, or you don't want it to do camping, you can do cars or whatever, right? You can then use different models which are trained on car information. You get the point. This is really, really adaptable and really sort of pliable. So now we can go back to the presentation, and I will wrap up in a minute because I know we're running over. There we go, wrap up. Why does this help you? Well, the Azure Developer CLI gives you full control over your infrastructure and pricing. So the big thing when it comes to AI and deploying AI infrastructure and AI models is pricing. There's a really big question mark over how much is this going to cost you when you deploy something because of all the names. You know, you've got quotas, you've got temperature, you've got p-top values, you've got all these different words that we're using now. How much is it going to cost you to deploy that? Well, with this one, it's all within one wheelhouse. It's an entire ecosystem, and you get to see all of that, right? So this is a really good way to keep full control of your teams, full control of your environments, and have total transparency. It supports the four main languages that we're using at the moment in software development, especially in the AI era: Python, JavaScript, Java, and .NET. So if you're writing any of those wheelhouses, then it's great for you. Hopefully there's going to be more support in the future, but it's still quite a young product. Maybe there's going to be more. I hope so. It's open source, so you can also get hands-on with it. So if you want to create your own templates, so if you are pretty, I don't know, tech savvy or code savvy, and you want to start writing some platform code, maybe it's Terraform actually over there, I don't know if they're in here, or Bicep, then go ahead, see if you can do it. Have a little play with it. It doesn't need to be anything complicated. It can simply be a very simple hello world application that you can stand up. And hopefully in future talks, I can show you the infra synth. I can never say that word, infra synth, where you don't actually need the Bicep. It'll write it for you and you bring your own application code to it. And so if you just want to get hands-on, then go to aka.ms/azd. And if you want the template library, it is aks.ms/awesomeazd, because it's pretty awesome. I like that naming. So massive thank you very much for listening. If you want to connect with me, go wild. Otherwise, I will take some questions if you have any.